And I want to give a little bit of context around the title of this talk. Also, please note we do have the subtitles from automated translation attached to this presentation below if you prefer to read instead of listen. Um, to that end, the title of this talk is based on a much disgraced, once famous American boxer by the name of Mike Tyson. He once said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." And that's to say, everybody knows what they're doing professionally, sometimes personally, in a sporting context such as boxing, when they walk into a sight unseen event, right? It's when things start to go awry, when things start to look very different than that plan has laid them out, that we have to adapt, right? And so that's where plans go out the windows, and we have to adapt. In the conversational UX space, that means delivering conversational AI solutions for the public or for the client that we have signed up to serve, right? And so this talk is really more than anything about what do we do when plans fall apart. Design is not a principal part of what's going on with a project, with an initiative, with a company's larger roadmap. How do we get in as conversational UX designers and have an impact? How do we make impact and deliver good design in spite of difficult design team conditions? With that, this is themed after a once in a time there was a video game by the name of Mike Tyson Punch Out for the Nintendo NES system. Some of you may know it, and so we're playing a little bit with that today. So we will unfortunately, literally use the boxing metaphor until we get tired of it, until we beat it to death, figuratively and literally. So bear with me in terms of that, but I hope it is at least somewhat of a fun way to sort of frame this presentation. So, in a lot of ways, there are three things I want to talk about today. So, how do we design conversations when things are going smoothly, right? I think many of us are familiar with some of the primary frameworks in this space. We'll review what those look like. And then we'll talk about, from my perspective, in the professional services world, at a $50 billion a year consulting company, what does it look like when you end up on a project and you have anywhere from 4 weeks to maybe 4 years to deliver a conversational AI solution, but you simply are confronting adversity at every turn from a design perspective, simply when your plans break down. And so, what do you do when that happens? What are some of those conditions that can present themselves as adverse? And then, what do you do to get up and ultimately win the day or win the metaphoric boxing match under those conditions, right? I started alluding to it, but I do want to emphasize again, I am in professional services at Deloitte US Consulting Firm, right? We do work for any number of the Fortune 500 companies here in the US. Our international affiliates work with pretty much everyone you could name under the sun as well. It's a big organization, both in the North American side as well as our global presence. So the work we do is focused on delivering projects that clients help us define, and we have to work very closely with them to understand our requirements, what we're delivering, and how we're doing it, right? So client-focused consulting and project-based work. This is not a product organization where we're going to line up sprint over sprint to deliver 2 weeks worth of work iteratively. We just simply don't have that luxury often over the long haul. Again, parenthetical, some projects will ultimately be agile, but at the same time, it's just not the same delivery method as you're going to encounter in a product org. And again, one thing worth mentioning, I'm a conversation designer, conversation design lead. That said, much of the work I do does focus on experiences that are either built in the middle, and that is around the contact center, or the voice experience first by phone. So we're talking old school IVR in a lot of cases. But again, how do we design for that solution? How do we then integrate with chatbots, whether that's in a client mobile app, whether that's on their website, whether that's via SMS, WhatsApp, etc. We then move out of the voice experience and incorporate all of those into the modern contact center. So that's really the sort of the framing of where I'm coming from in terms of background. Now, for the plans. The good old double diamond, I think if we look at the left here, right? As Mike Tyson said again, everybody has a plan. There are numerous frameworks that inform really strong, thoughtful, professional user experience design for conversational interfaces, right? In the top left here, we have the UK Design Council's double diamond. To the right, we have the IDEO sort of inspire, ideate, implement approach. Below that, to the bottom left, we have a revised version of the UK Design Council's double diamond, where they bring in engagement and leadership in this sort of larger circular framework. And then we have the Stanford Design School sort of honeycomb, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test format, right? Fundamentally, these things are all, they all boil down to the same basic steps. We have to have some level of discovery, and then we have to define where we want to solve for what we've discovered. Sometimes that will require gathering technical requirements in the consulting space, right? It's going to be design walking very closely and very immediately, very quickly with technology, engineering, and then develop that potential solution and deliver it, right? And so all of these frameworks share those common elements to really make sure that you do have good, solid grounding and a good, solid understanding of your clients and of the problem to inform the solution that you're working towards. That said, that's the plan. And I said we're going to talk about when plans break down under budgetary sort of strain, a lack of resources, or perhaps a lack of client interest. So continue on here, and I will pause in case there are any questions in the chat. By all means, Amanda, feel free to throw those at me at any point in time. Happy to field those in real time if needed. That said, we have a plan on the previous slide. Here, then you run into one of these characters, right? This field of potential bad guys that could get in your way as a designer, right? So design could be brought in late, simply enough. You're not first to the party. Rather, the project is ongoing. You're brought in at a later moment, and you're there to help save the day from a user experience perspective. You're not informing, you're not driving the situation. Rather, you're there to pick up the pieces. Uh, Another problem, another sort of bad guy you could run into here, an overly aggressive timeline. You know what your process takes you. Regardless of which framework you use, it may take you several weeks to do all the work you want to do. What if you only have days? What if you only have hours? What if it was due last month? How do you work against that calendar? Another thing, again, clients will determine how much they want to spend, and ultimately there will be a handshake deal to understand, hey, this is what you've signed up for, this is what you've purchased, this is what we will deliver. What if there's no budget to pay for design and they say, we can do without that? How do you, as a designer who's still going to be staffed on this team because your organization, Deloitte in my case, values design and wants you to contribute to those projects, how do you work with a client who said, we don't want to pay for that? Unresponsive partners. And this is, again, any client services work. What do you do when you can't get people to answer an email or pick up the phone, right? When you have a question you need to solve for, how do you design around those types of situations? Um, Also, what do you do if you get prescriptive, predefined solutions? When a client says, I want this, I want this, I know it's the right thing for my clients, we know our customers, we have our data, this is what we want. Again, but maybe they haven't gone through the steps of a proper discovery phase. Maybe they haven't gathered requirements in a UX focused way that's valuing the user first and foremost. Um, Other pieces, again, project side things that you run into all the time. Scope creep. I think that is projects growing out of control from what they were originally understood to be. And then having stakeholders, executives, the senior folks who are paying for these projects really being obsessed with new technology or not understanding the technology, but knowing a buzzword around something that's extremely important. A great example of this is not just natural language understanding and natural language processing in their respective lanes as they apply to our systems, but when an executive just hears natural language generation and jumps immediately to that, or they say, you know what, I saw something new that one of the big tech companies came out with in their last quarterly release, we want that. How do you deal with that passion for the technology without a deep understanding of it from someone very important and high up in your client company? And again, some of these other ones, I think they're worth saying out loud. The limited design power that sometimes you can have in the software development lifecycle, right? It is a triad: engineering, product, design. But often we know who wields the power. If it's coming from the business, it's going to be product. If it's coming from an engineering first organization, like much of big tech is, it's going to come from engineering. So you have to sort of find your place in that sort of triangle as well. Where do you exist and how can you drive impact and deliver a good solution as a designer when you are, deemed by your colleagues to be the least important part of that overall framework? Um, I'll go ahead and jump in now. We understand what the problems are that we may run into, and these are all things that are confronted regularly when delivering conversational AI solutions for client services. So again, the things we hear, right? Like those are the problems we have, but the client themselves will articulate these in different ways. They'll say, "We know our users. There's not a need to talk to them, right? We know them. We've been dealing with them for years." Or they say, "You know what? Here's our entire contact center, every single use case, every single voice flow, subflow. Here you go. Redesign those for Monday, right? Today, Friday evening, right?" Um, the other one, you know, we have a great functional system. Just fix the content and give it personality. That classic bringing design in late and saying, hey, can you just make it sound cooler, make it sound nicer, make it sound more contemporary than our old thing? We don't really need to think about this from a strategic angle. Um, And then, the bad use cases, right? What if a client's got an experience and they say, we have a driving experience for the automobile and we want to onboard our user onto a voice app while they're driving 150 kilometers an hour, right? Absolutely terrible idea from a UX and personal safety perspective, putting life and property in harm's way. But you get clients who ask for crazy things and ask for things that don't always make sense. How do you push back against that? Another thing, right? The tech stack upon which these experiences are built, right? There are only so many cloud solutions. Big tech X, big tech Y, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. What do you do when they say we want this platform and we have this stack? And there may or may not be any ability to really easily integrate or design for a solution in the first place with that integration framework uh, coming down the pipeline. Another one you hear often is internally someone saying, "Hey, the client wants it, so we have to deliver it." Right? Nothing that is harder to hear from a partner or someone very high up in your own organization in professional services than the client wants it, we're going to deliver it without putting pressure on the use case. It does happen. Usually we see our way through bad ideas, but occasionally there is just extreme pressure to deliver something. So these are the types of things we're going to hear from clients all the time in the professional services world, and you have to work through them. You have to do your best to deliver the best design solution you can for the best technology that you can in the conversational AI space. So, how do we get there? And I think this is really what I want to sort of get at now is let's take a look at three of these adverse conditions that we just outlined, three very specific ones, and talk about how we can turn taking a metaphoric punch to the face and turning it into that metaphoric victory in the ring, right? None of these problems are insurmountable. And that's not just optimism, right? Consultants, we're all very good speakers. We're all very good salespeople. It's true. But to that end, this is not just optimism around, being the consummate salesperson. This is actually saying that, hey, as a designer first, a consultant second, there really is a way to make sure that you deliver a strong solution that you as a designer are proud to put in your portfolio and that you feel is good for the users themselves, right? You always want to put something out there that adds value to the experience, adds value to the user's life and their interaction with the client, product, or service, right? So we can solve for all of this, but we do have to be deliberate, we have to have a methodical approach, and we have to have strong stakeholder management. And that is reeling in the people around you, managing the folks you're working with, whether they're your own team and your own expectations from your leaders, leaders, the client doers, that is the people you're collaborating with, and the technology partners who own the platforms and solutions that you're ultimately delivering. That could be telephony, that could be the cloud provider, that could be the dialogue managing layer, whatever that is, right? And to be honest, in solving for a lot of these, you straight have to have a lot of charm. You've got to be a how do I put it? A just you have to muster every ounce of charm and influence that you can possibly muster and wield in those conversations. Simply enough. I don't think the joke was going to translate. Unfortunately, I was going to throw a joke, but I didn't see it playing well. So here we are. Round one. So the first problem I'd like to look at now is being pulled in late. The thing that every designer, maybe even in your own product organizations, has had to confront: getting pulled into the event late. So here's our bad guy, right? Late invite Larry. And again, the names may not translate as poetically as with the phonetics here, but we've got this guy. Who is he? He's the person who is at the other side of the table and says, you know what? We didn't scope for design. We need to bring a designer in here to make sure our content's good. We need to bring a designer in here to make sure we got this right. And so they desire conversation design. They wanted to contribute to the final solution, but either they didn't plan for having you in the conversation or they didn't scope for it up front. So what do we do with late invite Larry, who's an imposing character, as we can tell from his physique here? So when we're brought in late, what is the first thing and the only thing that we can really commit ourselves to doing? Get data fast. When you're late, you don't know what you don't know. And you have to try to come up to speed as quickly as you can by reviewing requirements, discovering documents, and then getting as much data you can to inform the use case decision. Define and understand your users beyond anecdote and understand how and why the team ended up where they are. It'll require a lot of conversations, talking on the fly, a bunch of pings in Slack, in Teams, in Skype, and whatever you use. Get in people's inbox, get in people's ear, and make sure that they're informing you so that you can get that data and take it and get yourself acquainted very quickly. Another thing you'll often have to do is draw from your own experience. If you don't have time to go back and actually do a full discovery that may take weeks or even months if it's really well done, you have to draw from your own experience, or sometimes pick up the phone and call a friend, someone who's done something similar in a similar context. That will be what ultimately helps you to have a chance to run your typical design playbook at an accelerated pace, or if you cannot run that design playbook or framework, to incorporate the elements that are most important to finding the right solution before you start writing code. That's most important, right? Contextualize the work at hand. Use those similarities and differences from your past experience or the experience of your colleagues, your mentors, others in the space. People are very generous in conversational design, and use that to really to drive the prototype or the solution that you have to help inform and deliver. Similarly to that, I think I've sort of already alluded to it, is use past artifacts, again, past projects, past project deliverables as accelerators. If this is a chatbot, look back at what you have from your chatbot wheelhouse, draw on those materials to help get where you need to be faster because you've been brought in late. And then more importantly, ask yourself the question, this is the fourth point here. Ask yourself the question, what is it the client really wants? If they've said, we just want to make the content right, do they really actually only need someone who's basically a UX writer? In that case, do you have to come in and run a full design playbook or try to incorporate all of those elements based on what the client need or desire is, right? What is how do they view and contextualize your role within the project team and what you're trying to deliver from that position? And again, if it's a specific contribution, your job just got much easier because you don't have to try and go run the whole double diamond in a matter of days. Second problem, that second metaphoric bad guy. There's no time, there's no budget, or there's no appetite for user research. So here we have no research Ray. He's ready to throw his punches. He's coming up here. And what is their strength? They know their users, right? They know who the folks are, their customers, their members, their participants, their clients, whoever they are from their enterprise perspective as a business side, either product owner or engineering lead. Their weakness is they also know their users, right? It's the same strength and weakness. They don't actually use data to inform what they know about their users. They're going off of anecdote, past experience, what they think their user actually is bringing to the table and to the party. And so, how do what are the strategies for overcoming a lack of research? And again, research here is the budget or the appetite for research. So, first thing you can do, you can still do research. It may not look like formalized industry or enterprise sponsored UX research in an actual UX research environment. You may not have users coming into an office or into a research lab to participate in a study, but you can go out and get friends and family data. You can get guerrilla exploratory research by crowdsourcing natural language inputs for training data or to help revise intents down the line, right? So even things is sort of is mundane but far reaching as quick little polls on LinkedIn, quick little polls on Twitter. Those are things that'll get you at least something, right? You have to take into account who you're talking to, contextualize it a bit more because you have not predetermined and pre-vetted these research participants. But again, any input is helpful when you're in a hurry and when you're working under duress or outside of solid working conditions as a designer. Get baseline data by whatever means the client relationship allows for. The other thing too, I think that if there's no research, one thing you can do is say, hey client, I love where we're going here. We don't have time for research. What I propose is let's have an internal pilot or an MVP soft launch. So instead of taking everything live, giving it to the entire public, hey, can we run a quick demo of this, or an MVP, a day one solution, I would say, not a proper MVP in software terms, but can we run some preliminary solution by our real users and or our internal users to really get a soft launch out there, get the flow, get the content out there, get real user data from that, and then use that to refine our experience immediately before launch instead of just taking it live because we've got the timeline that we have in front of us, right? Third thing you can do here, emphasize optimization and iteration after launch. And so this is no longer about the preliminary launch, but after the thing goes live, it is in production. It's being used by thousands, maybe millions of people, depending on scale. Emphasize to your client, we must optimize this. We must continue to take in all the data we have, process that, ideally not manually. Ideally, you're working with tools that would allow you to automate that, but take in every input you get, take in every interaction you get, use that to come up with more data, and then inform your next revisions, your next iterations to the experience, and plan for that as well. If it's not your project to deliver, help the client come to a place where they can then take over ownership of the interface, of the solution, that they understand that this is not a, hey, We launched the product, it's done. We have to continue to iterate on the experiences and continue to take this as far forward as we can as our users continue to evolve, as their use patterns continue to evolve, and as their needs from us as a company and as a servicing organization continue to evolve. The fourth is ideate and design a backup plan, right? So give alternate specs, right? If you don't have research, you don't know what you don't know, as I said earlier. So give them a plan B before you actually hand off to engineering. Make sure that there's a second plan to say, hey, if this is not working as we start to take this towards a launch, here's a second thought, something we might want to consider, and give them as full of design specifications as you can, just so they can fall back on that. Or if they do change their mind about the research piece and they say, we do want to invest some money in this upfront, they can go back and A/B test the original experience to what you've given them as a plan B. Takes more time. It's a luxury you often will not have, but it does give you that sort of step back and look at things from a closer angle to really that step back and look at things from a closer angle opportunity so that you do have the ability to course correct before you go too far off the rails. So again, user research doesn't always have to be with real users. It's about getting what you can out there and then navigating the client and their needs as well as you can in order to give them a way to work around potential bad decisions up front. Now, this is a big one, and it's one that applies well and far beyond just conversational AI or conversation design, and that is the infamous scope creep. So here we have scope creep Sam. What's his strength? He wants a good product. What's his weakness? He wants it all right now. He wants it today. Whatever the project is, even if it's scoped for to go several stages, he's going to take it 5 stages beyond that because he wants to try to squeeze that in because he's paying a lot to your organization. You're an expensive consulting company. He wants to get as much out of the engagement as he can, or because simply they want to accelerate to a better solution earlier on than perhaps they envisioned. And so to that end, therein comes the pressure to deliver more quickly. These, and again, I will say these strategies really are for overcoming scope creep on any software project as much as they are for conversational AI. But the first thing, and all 4 of these really do tend to be focused around the social and I think the human components of being on a team and really being diplomatic, ambassadorial, charming if you can. If it's funny and charming helps sometimes as well. But you do have to get your people in order to really make sure that you can overcome the scope creep problem as much as you do the actual technology and data behind it. So first things first, align your team response. If you see scope creep, tap somebody else on the shoulder. If you're in the design lane, make sure your engineers see it coming. Hey, is this scope creep? Are we seeing it? We thought this was a voice experience. Now they're talking about SMS and text messaging. Oh, and that's not just a proactive notification. They would like a 2-way SMS. That ultimately means a chatbot over the SMS channel. What else could this possibly turn into? Get engineering involved. Get a product manager involved if you have one. Get your engagement lead involved if you can as well. It's a coordinated effort, simply enough. Don't go it alone and do not suffer in silence. Make sure everyone is aware of scope change as early and often as possible, and escalate as quickly as you can as the person doing the work as a designer so that you don't ultimately get asked to redesign 300 things in a very short period of time. Again, you set yourself up for failure by not communicating the larger issue around scope creep. Second thing, have data and use it to communicate the effects of scope change. If we add this other solution, again, I'll use the example from before. If we're in voice, IVR only, now we want to add in some SMS, proactive notifications. How much does that cost in terms of time, budget, resources, people that we have to pull from other parts of the solution or from testing or a later stage of the project? What do we have to pull from that to deliver this thing that is creeping? Get data on that, put it in front of your leadership, put it in front of clients, and make them know, hey, this is an iterative process. Whether we're going to take it over as a consulting partner of yours, or you're going to take this over and run it as your own solution that you will own after handoff, this is something that will continue to be optimized over time. We are not going to just put this down when it goes live. We don't need to do everything today. We need you to understand these are the effects of scope change if we don't correct where we're headed. The third thing here, remind the client what they came for. If they came with a use case to solve for a very specific thing. I'll be very frank. COVID interrupted the world. A lot of servicing changes happened across every industry and vertical you can imagine, and a lot of that was delivered by consulting partners, right? IVRs, the need for chatbots, phone systems, an immediate increase, exponential increase even in customer communications came out of nowhere, and people needed to solve for that with either higher volume systems or better user experiences or brand new use cases, sometimes all three. If the client came to you for that specific use case, remind them, you came for one use case to solve this problem. Let's solve it today, and then we can iterate on it to help you get to the next use case and have a strategy behind what we're doing. If we're going to be tactical now, let's be strategic later. Solve for what you came for today. We will get to the much bigger picture as soon as we can. And again, remind them if they are demanding a tactical solution, that is to say, a band aid for a much bigger problem, say, yes, we'll solve for this, but I need you to understand we want to go back and make sure that all of the overarching strategy is behind this. Just because you're in a hurry, just because you have an immediate problem, doesn't mean that's the right way to design and solve for this. We need to get there to where we can have design brought in around all of that strategy as well. So the fourth piece here as well, play the long game. That's to say, think into the future, think about the long haul. What are the conditions of the delivery you're doing? How do you ultimately want to have this all characterized, again, for tomorrow? And it goes into the strategy piece that I said. It's not about one chatbot or one flow or one IVR or one servicing part of an organization. It's about the overall digital ecosystem, the ability to have strong omni-channel, multi-experience solutions that really can meet the user wherever they are, use as much data as possible to inform the most friction-free experience they have for whatever their need is as a customer in financial services, in medical, pharmaceutical, education, government, whatever that is. So again, I think to summarize here, we've got these three bad guys, and there are some common threads throughout these strategies of how to figuratively knock them out. First and foremost, get data, any data to inform your work. Second, crowdsource, and that is look for public or sort of network inputs anywhere you can where you can't get real ones. The third thing would be leverage past artifacts and experience as accelerators, and don't be afraid to phone a friend. I will say again, use your network to solve for things that are difficult to solve for. The fourth, align your team for a coordinated response. Whether it's scope creep or being brought in too late, make sure that your stakeholders on your team and on the client team and any partner teams fully understand that this needs to be a coordinated effort so that you can all get on the same page more sooner than later. That said, that's all I have from a Deloitte perspective today. I think we're on time. I'm not really sure. I don't have a clock showing on my screens right now, but we'll call it and jump to the chat.